We're just going to let everybody in from the waiting list. There's over 100 of you here today. So give us a minute and we'll let everybody in, and we'll start the presentation soon. But thank you for joining us. Lots of familiar names. For those of you just joining us, just letting people in, taking a bit of time, because there's lots of you who want to chat about the list, which is great. So give us a few minutes and we'll kick off shortly. Oh yes, we're repping today the Motherhood Crew, Strong Girls Club. Feels very strange not hearing from everybody. Hi, Lucy. Lucy's my savior today. She's going to help me with questions later. What's the Motherhood Group? It's a small business, and she just does the small Strong Girls Club. She does lots of merch around that. Hi, Terry. Nice to see you. You can shout me out in the chat. Let's see who's here. You can tell me what you're reading as well if you like. Of course, the 200 books I've got on my TBR. It's just inconsequential, right? Casey, are we allowing note takers? AI ones? What's the deal?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. We'll see how that works out. Hi, Jenny. Just saying, we're just letting people in off the waiting list into the main room. There's over 160 of you here, no pressure, melting emoji. Well done for whoever showed the Motherhood website, nice work. Absolutely. And lovely Sally, hello Sally. It's really nice to see some familiar names here. So we're just gonna let everybody in and we'll kick off in a short while. Grab your sandwich, get a coffee or a cup of tea, get those biscuits in front of you, and we'll chat soon. Okay, I've got 170 people here. Hi, hi. Hello from Leicester Children's Hospital. Lovely. Actually, I worked at a program at Leicester Children's Hospital when I was an employee, not a freelancer. Hi, Lisa. Oh. Really lovely to see such a mix of charities and geographies. Okay. So we're just waiting for everybody to filter in. Casey is doing a fabulous job of letting everybody in. So whether you can have your cameras off or on, it's absolutely fine. I can't see anybody's faces apart from mine and Casey's anyway at the moment. West Yorkshire, hello. Hi, Andy. Oh, Lisa from Dad's Rock, based in Edinburgh. That sounds fabulous. What do you think? Should we start, Casey? What do you think? And just let people filter in?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, right. Casey's going to keep an eye on the waiting list and let people in. But there's 185 of you here at the moment to talk about all things the list. So good afternoon and a warm welcome to one of the first free webinars that Fair Collective are hosting, a part of Small Charities Week. So my name's Jeffery. I'm one of more than 100 associates that make up Fair Collective. When I was freelancing, when I started freelancing 3 years ago, I very quickly became aware of Fair Collective and Vic Hancock Fair's work, and I was really delighted to join them last year. Fair Collective match organisations, big and small, but specialise in small charities with talented freelancers across the UK. Our day rates are based on income levels, which ensure that everybody can have access to support regardless of their size and their income. And 50% of profits made are reinvested in Fair Collective's missions, which have included the list. And I'm forever grateful for Vic Hancock Fair for seed funding the list. And I have a couple of exciting announcements to make at the end of the presentation, which are in no small part due to that funding. So thank you all for being here. It's really lovely to have so many people joining me to talk about the list. I'm old school, I have notes. So if you see me rattling around, it's because trying to capture all of the information in one place, it's been quite a challenge. So the slides are by no means detailed in any way. All the information I will speak to you about as we go along. If you have any questions at any point, please put it in the chat and we'll make time for everything at the end. There's a lot of you here. I can't see you all, but I think, yeah, over 180. I haven't seen the updated list. So there's a lot of you here. I might not see hands raised. So please feel free to drop a question in the chat. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you feel free to drop into my DMs and ask me a question. And let's see where we land today. So I'm here for about an hour. And what I'm going to chat to you about is the background to the list. What are the key trends and the commentary and the thoughts I'm having from working, hello Lucy, for what I'm seeing. We've got a couple of announcements to make, which are exclusive to the Small Charities Week audience here today, which I'm really excited to share with you. And then we have some Q&As at the end. So it's been quite the year, hasn't it, really? Probably quite a few years. I started the list, fondly known as the Mega Spreadsheet by Rachel and Mike at Lime Green Consulting. It was first published in March 2024 against a backdrop of some very high-profile spend downs and pauses, which included Lankelly Chase, Albert Hunt, Royal Foundation, Edward Gosling, and of course, the Tudor Trust. But it was actually the Gisela Graham Foundation that sparked the creation of the spreadsheets. As a freelancer working across different organizations, I was starting to see and hear shifts in grant making. Communication was perhaps dwindling and success rates were shifting. There was chat on Facebook and LinkedIn, and the mainstream narrative was and continues to be that we're seeing an increase in grants distributed. And there is evidence for that, and we'll come back to that later. But what it didn't reflect was what you and I, as a fundraiser, were experiencing on the ground. Some ever so subtle shifts that were affecting our day-to-day work. Now, Felicia, Willow, and I both call the fundraisers the canary in the coal mines. And I think what was frustrating for me and quite upsetting for me is that fundraisers were internalizing those subtle shifts and very much saw it as a them problem. They weren't writing good enough application forms. They weren't communicating well enough with their trust and foundations. But what we know now with hindsight and all this information included in the list, that it was very early warning signs of what I've also called the great restructuring. So what we've seen in the last 15 months, or what we've catalogued, because this is not just my project, I just happen to be the spokesperson. So with help from you as fundraisers, we've catalogued over 350 changes across 12 categories. Now, they're not unique. They're not, you'll see similar names and the same names pop up over and over again. So they're not unique catalogued items. But we've seen some high profile funders announce their closing and their pausing. We've seen City Bridge, Henry Smith, Children in Need, and the Lottery all change their grant making behaviour. And that just scratches the surface. The categories most populated are the restructuring and the pausing. The restructuring tends to be the people like City Bridge who have announced the changes in their strategy and perhaps their eligibility criteria. The pausing, however, is a temporary, often with no defined timescales, that halt normal kind of application processes and are typically in response to the increased volume that trusts and foundations are seeing. Now, they may or may not come when they reopen with a change of criteria. It's a guesswork, right? This is typified by Albert Goubet Foundation, who paused for about 9 months, only to reopen for perhaps the shortest window. I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks before pausing once again, with no known date as to when they're going to open again. What we're seeing specifically at the moment, which is really interesting, some of the pauses are including a change in the systems behind the scenes of the trust and foundations. We've seen this in the likes of Children in Need, Weinstock Foundation, and the Clothworkers Foundation. Clothworkers Foundation is particularly interesting. So what I'm going to do throughout today is kind of drop in some of the things that I find particularly interesting. I have a bit of a magpie mind. I tend to follow my nose and find the interesting nuggets of information that stand out to me. So Clothworkers Foundation was particularly interesting because they are pausing to look at their strategy and look at their impact assessment framework. But they have enrolled CAST and Rocket Science to undertake their grant assessments whilst they do this. Now, I think this is the first foundation who've perhaps introduced this way of working to stay open whilst they do this work, to get some help from other infrastructure organizations. The communication has been top tier. 10 out of 10, no notes. Their social media presence is excellent. And they're regularly keeping us updated. I'm going to come back to that later. Before I move on, I think it's really important for me to say, the list, I intend it to just be factual. There's no judgment. There might be a little bit of judgment somewhere. There's no judgment, and it's just an open access information point. That has always been the key to the list for me, is to provide open, timely, and accessible information that is up to date. So organizations, big and small, can have access and have information to make day-to-day decisions. Before I move on, I also want to recognize that behind the scenes of trust and foundations is very hard in the face of what we're all experiencing. They often don't have the resources, the staff, the structure, or the skill to deal with the increased volumes of applications. So I don't think it's any surprise as to why there has been an increase in applications. Trusts and foundations are making up the shortfall of statutory funding. In 2024, in their State of the Sector report, NPC quoted that charities propped up the public sector services to the tune of 2.4 billion each year. I think that's pretty conservative, small c as well. Just last week, with the release of 360 Giving's new data, for the first time, government grants were not the main source of income. Grants from governments have decreased in real terms by 2 billion, where trusts and foundations have increased 12% to 8.2 billion in 2023-2024. However, that commentary about the increase in trust and foundation grants doesn't address how the funds are distributed, which the list seems to address. So what we're going to do, we're just going to quickly run through some of the specific highlights from familiar grant-making names before going through some of the overarching trends that I'm seeing. So when we talk about distribution of funds, what we are seeing is perhaps a move to more proactive funding, where open programs aren't as common as they used to be. Comic Relief had a short dalliance last year with a small open program, but seemingly are running a more proactive grant-making program, although have never explicitly stated that. We've seen Children in Need mention how competitive their application process has before the pause, and even good project fits are not seemingly getting the funding. Tudor Trust pause for, I think, if Karen Chalk is on today's webinar, she knows more than anything, she's tracked it. I think it was 2022 when Tudor Trust first announced their pause. This year, I think last autumn, they made their first tranche of grants in a proactive manner. It seems that they will be making an open program at some point, but that hasn't been disclosed at the moment. National Lottery have gone through their relaunch with their new strategy, and it'll be interesting to see in a year's time, or perhaps a few months when they submit to 360 Giving, what kind of grants they're making. Should the slides be moving on? No, they're literally this. I'm not doing any details at the moment. Henry Smith launched, who are due to launch their new strategy, I think tomorrow, have actually increased their grant making in the last year, even after a 3,000% increase in their applications in the final round before they paused. I think that's really fascinating. I think those of you who are Henry Smith grant recipients, I would really like to hear about your experience, but inflation has been accommodated and some continuation granting within their pause has gone forward. And not forgetting, probably the most important people that are not on the list are Garfield Weston. A Herculean effort by Garfield Weston to prop up the sector at the moment, and I don't ever want to see that name anywhere near my list. Although these are hugely significant in terms of income to our sector and the structural changes and the implications that this makes, I think the trickle down from these and the impact that these closures and pauses have are actually really understated. The £1,000 to £10,000 income brackets, I think, is really important, and I think is what we'll continue to see impacted. There's no more names, I don't think, from some of the big guns. We've had a lot of big announcements in the last 15 months. I think what we'll start to see now, and what I'm seeing, is that trickle-down effect on the small family foundations. Now, for me, that's a really important tier. That £1,000 to £10,000 grant bracket underscores all of our service delivery work and comprises a lot of that our income portfolio. You know, I see lots of organizations who have between 50 and 200 of those trusts and foundations in their portfolio. It was really interesting to see Gifted Philanthropy's recent work, where they stated that actually the most competitive grant bracket was that £5,000 grant bracket. And I think that's what we feel as fundraisers on the ground. Yes, those big changes are significant and quite scary, but actually the trickle down and the effects on that £5,000 bracket is really important. Going back a year, this was also kind of reinforced by 360 Giving's evidence that actually a lot of the grant making they were seeing was below £10,000. And so as overarching trends, It was the lovely Steve Ullman that challenged me to have a think about what I was seeing. If you don't follow Steve, he's brilliant. He posts every day on LinkedIn about the charitable sector in a fun and engaging way. And it made me really stop and think about the trends I'm seeing. So what we're seeing at the moment, I think, really impacts the day-to-day working of fundraisers. And it's something that I think we just take in our strides. I think it has more of an impact on mental health than is recognized, but it's worth absolutely highlighting. So what we're seeing now is the early closure of windows. So trusts and foundations have published a set date as to when they're going to open their portal or when they're opening their applications. And what is happening is that they're closing early. I don't think anybody has beaten Three Guineas Trust. They opened on the 3rd of February this year with the aim to close on the 28th of February, only to announce on the 5th of February that they were no longer taking applications. I don't think I've seen anything so swift before or since. We're also seeing skipped windows, where planned windows, published windows, just don't open. So we've seen that in both the Victoria Wood Foundation, which have recently announced for the 2nd year in a row that they're not going to open their summer window. And we've seen it in the Grocers Company recently, where they deferred their I think it's their January window. Most of it's to do with the volume of applications. What we're also seeing is what I think I've termed closed doors. So changes that preclude new applications. And this includes the likes of the Sobel Foundation, who I think you had to have previously made an application within the last 5 years, successful and unsuccessful. Somebody can perhaps remind me, to be able to make another application. We've also seen the likes of, and when I talk about the impact on the smaller family foundations, we've seen the likes of the David Family Foundation and the Thompson Family Foundation, who I think have both moved to proactive funding after the volume of applications became unwieldy. What's also been interesting, and what I've written about today on the weekly update, is the James Tudor Foundation. Now, they've made both thematic and geographical changes to their grant making in response to an increase in demand. Their mental health, they've changed thematically to narrow the focus. And their palliative care, they've changed geographically, I think focusing on South West and South Wales, to try to allay the overwhelming number of applications that they are receiving. What's been interesting for James Tudor is they've done it fractionally. They've kind of made changes here and there. They haven't stopped, but it looks like every time that there's perhaps a trustee meeting, some little tweaks are being made. Now, I think I previously referred to those as the stutters. This is what I class them as, and where they might go, is that these small changes, these small stutters, may well end up at some point with a more significant pause or stop. James Tudor is really interesting because if they can't, by changing their criteria, stop the overwhelming number of applications, will they look to pause in the long term? One to watch. I wish I had a crystal ball that I could tell you. I'm still surprised daily with the volume of changes I get. So I'm thank you for you guys for being so involved. I get emails, I get tags, I get messages all the time about changes to grant making, because we know that trusts and foundations are not always particularly forthcoming in their communication when it comes to changes. Lots of things are done by email or done perhaps behind the scenes, and changes to web pages are made without us really knowing. And I think that's the most frustrating part, and especially for small organizations who don't have the resources that perhaps larger organizations do. I know many of you are monitoring and developing multiple income streams. Trust and foundations just happens to be one of those things. And when you're constantly looking for information, I think it was the Gosling Foundation, not to be confused with the Edward Gosling Foundation. Gosling Foundation, and I think it was Philippa and Sam, so thank you for this, last week or the week previously, had noticed that their education priority had dropped off the website, and had to chase up and ask, okay, you know, is this a priority that's fallen by the wayside? And it has. I think there'd be lots of time saved if trusts and foundations were more forthcoming with information about their changes. It's been really interesting. I think it was Ivar who published in an open and giving report recently that just 40% of trusts and foundations in the cohort they work with published their success rates. And I think the main reason was because they feared reputational a backlash. Now, for me, I'd much rather have all of the information up front so I can advise my organizations, my clients, the best use of my time as a freelancer for you as your time as employees to manage the day-to-day portfolio. Just going to take a small drink. Perimenopause. So we can't stop the tides of change, sadly. Really trying to. I'd love to be able to navigate this period with a lot more openness from trusts and foundations. But there is good news and there is good practice. Cloth workers, as I've mentioned previously, have had a really good communication strategy for their grant-making changes. Robertson Trust did an excellent job last year when they paused about keeping people updated with information about how they were changing, timestamps, when windows were going to open, like tranches of programs, and when they were, that's gold. Cheers Foundation, a big shout out to them. They used the list as evidence to not only increase their overall budget for spending and grant making, but also as leverage to increase their individual grants. So as much as I know this list gives us grey hair and challenges us as fundraisers, there is some good practice stuff out there. And we should also shout about that as much as we shout about the bad practice and the poor practice, because there is still eligibility criteria that isn't commensurate with the amount of grant available, that I wish there was tighter eligibility sometimes. So we are absolutely clear. If we can apply, I want all of the information. So the premise of the list was always to keep fundraisers up to date, have timely and accessible information. And we are navigating a huge shift in grant making. I think we've called it a quiet crisis before. And it does feel so significantly different to where we were 5 years ago. Now, I've been a fundraiser for 10 years. I wasn't privy to a lot of the changes prior to that, but it does feel really significant at the moment. And it's, for me, I want fundraisers to be supported in their day-to-day job, to have the best information that they can possibly have to inform their senior management and the trustees on their boards, because I'm acutely aware of increasing targets, sometimes without consultation, and how realistic it is to keep meeting those ever-increasing targets. When the pool of funding, yeah, but there's loads of funders out there. Was it 10,000 odd grant makers, maybe more? Yes, and when people see a headline, there's an increase in trust and foundations distributing the funds. Of course, people want to be able to engage in that. So it's really important that we have this shared resource. And I think I can now change. Oh yeah, that's me. So I've got some exciting announcements. I know how much we love the spreadsheet. Google spreadsheet, nice and easy to input. But we have a website coming. So with thanks to Ivar and Tom Watson at Data for Action, in the next few months, we're going to be developing a web page for the list, which we hope will make it a slightly more user-friendly, much more participatory. There will be some alerts to Lucy is having a little party in the chat box. Yeah, I'm really, really thrilled. When Tom mocked up the webpage, it actually made me cry, and not for the reasons previously, where the list has made me cry because of the sheer volume of changes and the amount of navigation it will take for us fundraisers to keep on top of this information. So this is a positive cry rather than it was going to be nothing to subscribe. That's where I want to keep it. It will be free at the point of access. You will have much as you have at the moment. There will be regular updates. You'll still have my weekly Monday updates and circles on Substack. But we hope to use some more information sources. So there'll be some more, a better framework around the information we're providing. Because one of the things I'm really keen to look at is, okay, in the scale of these changes, what causes are being omitted? What geographical areas are missing out? You know, I have anecdotal evidence based on an online launch party. Oh, yes. Yeah, bring your coffee and your tea, we're all there. You know, I've only got anecdotal based on gut instincts. Lots of things. My general feeling is that family support is being missed from re-strategization. I think youth services is obviously overwhelmed. I think still, an example of that would be Still Charitable Trust, who paused to re-strategize and are still hugely overwhelmed by applications. And I think this is the bit that's going to be really powerful for us, not only in fundraisers in our own organizations, but as a sector, I think we can raise our voices and campaign for change. With that in mind, I'm also hoping to update on Golden Ponds. So this year we've got fundraising for the jilted generation. So it will place the list in the commentary that we have. So the 360 Giving commentary, we talked about the increase in trust and foundation grants available, but the distribution is lost somewhat. You know, that it doesn't address how funds are being distributed, which is the impact that we are feeling acutely on the ground. So fundraising for the jilted generation, I say September, and I'm hopeful for that, but it might slide slightly. So bear with me on that. And let's see where we land. So that is a really brief whiz through of the list. I know that people who are I know lots of familiar names. I know that people follow me here. So I do an update every Monday morning at 8, which captures the previous week's changes. If there's any significant change, I will do a biscuit drop and let people know immediately. The spreadsheet is updated as soon as I receive information. So that is your live information portal. I also release a newsletter every Monday or Tuesday, which captures not only the changes to the list, but some more information about what I found interesting and what my mind is finding. And I think that is the end of the whiz through. And should we go through some questions? Let's have a look. Lucy, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, all good. I just want to say how I'm a freelancer. I want just to say how wonderful the consultant like community is. We're incredibly supportive of each other. So I just want to say a big thank you to Lucy because she was part of that, and a big cheerleader of the list.
Oh, I love the list. Do you know how often I go to the list and I go, I wonder if Jo knows? Oh, she does know. Does Jo know? It's on the list. She does know.
They also do tell me, because I went through the list this morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to cut and paste what actually it means in there.
I know,
So,
but normally it's already on there. Your networks are already buzzing with whatever information. I feel like it just shows that I always come to it really late, but it's all there. So as we went along, there were kind of there wasn't so many questions as you were going, but there's a few that come in nearer the end. Terry was asking, do you think that AI has had any impact on application overwhelm? And are there any stats on how many charities are now applying to trusts and foundations compared to, say, pre-pandemic? Really interesting question.
I would imagine that AI has made an impact on applications. I don't have any statistics about. That would be fascinating, wouldn't it? We'd have to aggregate up all the things. It would have to mean that, you know, going back to being open and transparent, the trusts and foundations would have to publish the amount of applications they receive. And I don't think that would be a bad thing. I would love those statistics. I think there's a real reticence to share information because of risk, but I would really like to know. It would help me on a day-to-day basis to advise my clients. It would help you guys to make a decision and advise your board. So no, I don't have it. I would love to have it.
I think it would be really helpful. I had it the other week with was it Spa Foundation? They were like, we had 11,000, 11,000. I can't remember how many it was. 100,000 applications. Basically, you could very quickly work out that the success rate was 0.36%. At that point, I just went, okay, not for me, move on.
I think you have to be that cutthroat at the moment, and that's the sad thing. But we do have limited resources as fundraisers, especially small organizations. So we have to be really discerning with our time, right?
Absolutely. I've got a couple of questions from Tamsin. First of all, what do the cross-through rows on the spreadsheet mean?
What do the what, sorry?
The crossed through rows on the spreadsheet mean?
Crossed means there's been an update. So I didn't want to get rid of it. I didn't want to delete it because it was really interesting to see who the repeat offenders were. But it just means there's probably an update somewhere else on the spreadsheet.
That's good. And a couple of people are asking, where should they sign up to the newsletter? Where should they send updates to? Is that all on this current slide?
Yeah, you can. I will publish something on LinkedIn. Yeah. You can find me. I will publish on LinkedIn. So there's Circles is part of my newsletter that I write on Substack, and you can follow me there. What was the second question? This is how good my brain fog is.
So it was like how to send information to you and how to sign up for the newsletter.
Anyway, you can send a message to me on LinkedIn. You can email me, and I'm happy to share my email address. If you're on Facebook, on either Trust Fundraising Hub or the freelance group, you can message me that way. But there will excitingly be, as part of the web redevelopment, a form which you can submit straight in.
Nice. Oh, sorry, click on. Lee was asking, do you think essentially, how is it possible there's so many more applications? Are there 100 more fundraisers around, or are there fewer funds?
Ooh. I think there are probably fewer funds in terms of, we talked about that open and closed program. So I think what we're seeing is a move towards more proactive grant making. So obviously there's a smaller pots to go for. In terms of fund, I think there was a really interesting statistic, and it was Caroline Danks from Larkowl and in her ROI report. And I think what we have is a better skilled workforce than perhaps when we did 5 years ago. So we're seeing actually an increase in competence in making applications too. So I think that's a really interesting take. If we'd have a less skilled workforce, maybe the success rates would be worse, actually. So I don't know about how many applications are. Yeah, I couldn't tell you unless they publish, trusted foundations publish their own data.
I do feel like during COVID, when you couldn't do a lot of event fundraising, you know, meeting your donors, that kind of thing, people did lean much more towards trusts and foundations. And as you say, perhaps they've developed the skills and have continued to do that.
Yeah.
But as you say, you know, Caroline's report showed us that return on investment, trust and foundation wise, we're doing really well and we're doing better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though there's more people applying, we seem to be doing better at it.
Yeah.
Carrie asks, will you be proactively engaging with funders directly to get more detail for the updates, especially if they don't have an online presence?
Oh, probably not. I'd love to have the time. This is just my side hustle still. I still have client work to do. This is still a side gig. I very much would like to, and Ivar, I know, and Cast. So Cast and Ivar together relaunching Grant Advisor, which is TripAdvisor for grant trusts and foundations, where you can leave a review. So it isn't my focus will always be fundraisers. It is for fundraisers by fundraisers. That's my angle. I have been able to engage some are really forthcoming and really open, and it's been a real joy. Others are not. And yeah, but it won't be the focus. I'd love to be for trusts and foundations to be more proactive, but I just don't have the capacity to do that.
Maybe somebody else could raise their hand. Put your hand up to do that. There's a few questions around. I think you kind of started to mention it about trends. You know, different closures, restructures, different sectors, UK, overseas, geographical. There's a few kind of questions around that, or whether kind of post-COVID, different things have shifted.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I haven't done a deep dive yet. I mean, on Golden Ponds, which was the briefing note I released last September, is the most up-to-date information that we have. But 360 Giving have only in the last week released more information. Funding for Jilted Generation will be that updated piece of research to look at trends, challenge them, agree with them, because I don't disagree with everything. You know, I'm not being deliberately provocative, but there is some commentaries I have to challenge the mainstream narrative around distribution of funds, amount of funding. It's work in progress. But if you want to look at last year's, it's on my Substack and it'll be on my LinkedIn.
Sorry, I just had that thing where it just went and loads just appeared. I'm just seeing what ones I've missed. What's the best way to find out or calculate chance of success if the funder doesn't publish much data about that? Is it best to apply for lots we're a good fit for and hope we get or be much more targeted?
Oh, I go for targeted. And let's be really smart about. And I think what I've said, I mean, I've been that fundraiser who used to, you know, put out, you know, a lot of applications with a good success rate. Maybe not even that long ago. And that's the worrying part. I went freelance. This is my 4th year. So previous to that, I had a really good success rate. Yes, it was targeted, but I did also hedge my bets. I think I've completely flipped. I would say the time that perhaps used to be spent on application development, put into prospect research, make sure, and it's really hard because not all of the information is out there. As small charities, you're not going to have the time. I'm given the time by my clients to do a deep dive into the lovely Charity Commission website when it's up and running and not glitchy, to to go into those accounts and find those little gems, because they are hidden in there. There's lots of information I found out in charity accounts. As to like a DINT charitable trust are going back to their pre-pandemic level spending, having had an inflated pot of money for the last 5 years. Now that's quite significant, especially if you're a health organization. That's where they mostly fund. So yes, prospect research, really good, very targeted.
Yeah, I agree. Those annual accounts can really reveal. Yeah, I agree. I think the annual accounts can tell you so much, but you can always pick up the phone or send a quick email. I think a lot of funders would rather you did that and spent 5 minutes doing that than doing a whole application. So I think
You know
can
what?
ask.
And especially now, I had a couple of recent communications that went particularly well. And I was like, oh, this is how I remember it to be. Not like you send the email and it disappears off into the ether. You know, I've had really good conversations with clerks in the last couple of weeks that reminded me why I love Trust and Foundation fundraising. And I think, no, there was and I can't remember her name, I'm so sorry, but there was a great post on LinkedIn last week, which was I think, all I remember, it was a 7 minutes kind of introduction. There was a Zoom call, and the fundraiser was very clear if they could apply or not. I think I know, you know, there's lots of trusts and foundations who are introducing that webinar, you know, how, you know, introduce, like, there's a really, I think it was Friends Provident who said, you know, to say hello to us. There was just a little short introduction form. That is great. And that's some really good practice stuff. You know, there's short forms, they get, we're a good fit. Introduce, say hi to us. That's really good practice. So an email and a telephone call is always a great start, but I know it's increasingly hard to engage.
Questions to me thick and fast. Edward said, a bit of a provocation, I think. Could an unexpected product of your amazing list and the new website actually it would be tougher for charities to get money, as there'll be more charities going after ever decreasing number of trusts?
I battle with this all the time. And it's really hard, isn't it, to, for the pluses of the list, it does have a side where you think, am I perpetuating the problem? Like, is it me? Is it me? Am I the problem? I can't answer that. All I can do is provide information with the best intents. It's tricky, isn't it? Sometimes knowledge
But
isn't
the reality is, you said there were 350 changes, but there are, if you look at the latest 360, the UK Giving, that's got 12,000 grant giving, you know, sources on there. You're talking about 350. So
it's not significant.
It's not,
and I think that's
every trust, no, not a database.
Not that we know of. And I think that's the bit, that's the, like, the common sense approach, is it? It's to take the list, apply it to your portfolio, and have a gentle reminder that, you know, you are the expert. There are changes. It's not widespread. You know, just have a sense check every so often. The list is just part of a suite of information that you use to prospect, research, and quantify your portfolios. It is, you know, it's one of many things.
Sam asks, have you had any negative or positive reaction from funders and engagement from funders from what you're doing on the list?
I've had some really great positive feedback. One foundation particularly are incredibly supportive. I haven't had anything negative to my face. I have had a foundation question, or a few actually. Having said that, I've had a few come to me and question why they're on there, because they didn't think, I think the general consensus is the small changes that they made, they didn't seem as consequential, which is a really interesting take. It was about changes to an application process, changes to a window, and that's really indicative, I think, of that power dynamic and perhaps a lack of understanding of what it takes as fundraisers who are managing multiple things, not just one income stream in small organizations. You know, it is the little things that take a lot of time. And like I was following, so sometimes I do take the time to quantify the list data just to make sure, because sometimes natural pauses in grant making are not like huge pauses, and I need to distinguish what are small pauses, what are big pauses. And the time taken to find out that information, obviously it's a bit convoluted at times. So yeah, I think people don't understand, or perhaps foundations don't understand, that small tweaks that actually do have an impact on our side. But on the whole, it's been okay.
Really good question from Susanna, which has led to a bit of a discussion chat. Do we think it's ever going to get back to normal, or is this chaos going to be continuing for the foreseeable? I've been trust fundraising for 20 years and I've never known it as bonkers as it is at the moment. What is normal?
That's really interesting.
Will it ever get back there?
I think it was really interesting when someone asked me, oh, but you know, it's going to slow down now, isn't it? Because all the big names have made their announcements. I mean, apart from Garfield Weston, which I hope never to see on that list. I do think that trickle down effect from the closing and pausing for the big names will continue to have an effect on the smaller, you know, family foundations. Ironically, after that question was asked, it was recently, I had my busiest week in terms of like the number of changes that I'd catalogued for that week. It was like maybe 5 or 6. I'd like to think at some point I can look retrospectively at the list as a historic statement. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're going to see a good 6 to 12 months of it continue. 6 months is optimistic. I don't think it's going to go back to normal. I think we are going to see more proactive grant making from trusts and foundations. I think that's where it's heading, which will mean that we will have to change how we communicate with our trusts and foundations in terms of our social media, our website, our comms side. That's where I see it going. It's going to be a flip of skills to put our case for support in a more open channel. So it's going to challenge us to be more open and transparent, you know, as we ask trusts and foundations to be more open and trusting and transparent. I think we'll probably get there faster.
Really brilliant question from Sarah Jane. Do you think the Association of Charitable Foundations, ACF, is doing enough?
Oh, interesting. I have had conversations with them. I had conversations with the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, ACF, NPC, all of the big acronyms. I don't think any of them have put it as a priority. They've all prioritized their audience. So for ACF, their audience is going to be the trusts and foundations. We're so hard to trying to crack. I think infrastructure organizations could do a lot more to support this work. I think we all win when there's information out in the open. There's certainly been discussions, mostly behind to the impact of these changes on grant making. None of it has the focus that I want, which is us as fundraisers, our mental health, the health and sustainability of our organizations. That's what matters to me. But I would challenge the infrastructure organizations to do a bit more. Absolutely. I'm there for that.
Yeah, I agree. And a question from Peter, which relates, is, well, he's saying, but I think it's also the question of, do you think there's a lack of understanding from some funders about the hard work it takes to research and prepare an application?
Absolutely.
You know, even one day less can make a big difference. I mean, sometimes you see the figures, don't you? This many applications, it took on average an hour. It cost the sector £100,000. You know, like that's quite scary.
Understated. And I think what's the frustrating part for me is like when that £5,000 grant has like 45 pages, not mentioning any names of an application with some really challenging information, because we have to go to the finance team, we have to go to the service delivery team and quantify our responses. This takes a lot of our time. I would love to see more engagement and testing of application forms with people on the ground before it gets launched. There's no good you pausing or re-strategizing and coming up with the same dire application forms. Come talk to us, we're here for it.
There's two, where you've only got 5 minutes left, there's two other kind of main areas that have been asked about. One, I'll ask you them both now. One's about Ludlow. What you think about Ludlow. And the other and the other is there's a few kind of more general questions about improving funding bids and that kind of thing. I don't know what I can't remember what all the other sessions this week are. They might cover some of that, but yeah, general top tips and Ludlow.
General top tips and Ludlow. Ludlow, oh, it's fascinating. I mean, in theory, isn't that a great way to like navigate an application to what, 250? I think they've also just taken on a new portfolio. 250.
400 it now says.
Is that what it
400. Yeah.
I haven't had great success. I had better success previously before the portal when you could apply separately. Again,
I've done better since the portal.
Yeah. You know, it swings and roundabouts. I think the lovely Michaela, I'm sorry, I don't know your surname, sent me information. Ludlow have got their own webinar coming up. I think we will hop on that and see what's going on, because I'm fascinated by it. I think it has great potential as a single portal to do lots of, you know, make that application. But it's again that feedback. There's not, you don't know if that application's been assessed or it's gone anywhere. You don't have any feedback from it. So good in theory, perhaps not in practice. General tips, what, as in terms of your applications, or?
Yeah, there were some questions like, how do you improve your chances? What makes a bid stand out? You know, why might some get funded and not others? Those kinds of questions.
Oh, we could be here all day for another hour.
Yeah.
On that. Casey, do we have anything else in the program? I think there was another. I think there was somebody else is doing a landscape trust and foundation, if I remember rightly.
I think they're doing resilience in fundraising. So looking at diversifying income, I think.
Okay. I think I probably won't answer that today. That could be another hour. I think my recommendation would be prospect research, and just find those that you're really aligned to and take the time. And I know it's really hard, isn't it? Because nobody has that time. Maybe we'll have a chat to Vic and we can see if we can do something on improving grant making. I just don't want to rush that and give you duff advice. I mean, not duff advice, but I don't want to rush it. Impact is always going to be, you know, impact and monitoring the value. I think what if we put it in the framework of the list, what we are seeing that trusts and foundations want is that impact and a value and strong evaluation background, which also does preclude small charities who don't have the skill or time to do it. But that's a whole other discussion. So I think, yeah, impact and evaluation is going to be a key theme coming up from the list.
Some people are just asking about the Ludlow webinar. I think the Ludlow webinar's on their LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll put it on
LinkedIn.
I'll share. So what I'll do following today, I will share a load of things that I've talked about, link to the list, link to On Golden Ponds, link to Substack. There's a whole raft of incredible research done not by me, but which I use, and it's fabulous, including Caroline Larkow, there's Gifted Philanthropy, that really help quantify the gut feelings that I think a lot of fundraisers have, but question their own intuition. So I will share that, and I'll put the Ludlow one out there too.
Rachel just saying, sorry, where will you share those? Will they come after?
Yeah, I'll share them on LinkedIn. I'll also share them with Casey. I can share them with Casey, and we can perhaps put them as follow-up notes.
Yeah, we'll share it from the collective in the next week or so.
Excellent. I'll put something together briefly this afternoon, but you can just come in and have a chat to me if there's anything else that crops up. I realize we've got 2 minutes left. Should we do one more question, Lucy?
I didn't see any more. I didn't know if you
No,
needed to do wrapping up. Here's the evaluation form or any of that kind of stuff at the end.
Are you seeing? Yes. So Pippa asked what I was really interested in. Are you seeing closures, restructures affecting specific sectors or themes or issues more than others? I can't talk about overseas funds, not my area of speciality. I'm a UK only registered charities girl. But I want to be able to get that information, and I'm hoping that the redevelopment of the list into a website, we get able to draw down that information a bit more easily. I think my gut feeling is family support is being massively overlooked in the re-strategization of children and young people. Yes, we can change our outcomes to better fit that, but I think again the time and skill it takes to do that is tricky. So yeah, family support, which is hugely needed at the moment when we talk about school absence and avoidance and the waiting list for mental health charities for our young people. I feel that's a really huge gap at the moment. But I'm sure we'll understand. I'm hoping that we understand a bit more as the list develops into its own little website. We are bang on 2 o'clock. I hope I've answered some questions. It's been a bit top level. I might put out something on Google as a Google form. If anybody wants to do a follow-up question, you can come and come and find me on LinkedIn and submit a question. Also, I don't know all the answers. I had no idea that this was going to be a thing that I did when I first started freelance. Retrospectively, if I knew sharing a spreadsheet would take over my life, I might question my judgment on doing that. So I'm not an expert by any means, but I like following my nose, and I will find information for you, but I don't have the answers to everything. And that's a good place to be in life, right? Great. Thank you all so much. A huge thank you to Lucy for helping me do the questions, because I would have perhaps been overwhelmed. Huge thank you to Casey at Fair Collective for being my wing woman and doing all the admitting. And it's really lovely to see you all. Have a good afternoon, and I will catch up with you soon. Casey, I'm just going to go through some of the questions, okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just to whiz through and have a look. I won't log off just yet, is that right?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll pause the recording.